Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to be sharing my process in drawing this beautiful blue hydrangea in coloured pencil. I created this drawing using Faber-Castell polychromos and Caran d'Ache luminance colour pencils on a Rising Museum board. I also used a little bit of Zesty pencil blend just for a touch of blending here and there. I didn't use this too much, I mainly blended my pencils using layering, but I did use it occasionally to smooth out some of the pencil texture. So you can see here I've started my drawing by drawing in the leaves. I will slow down the lower leaf so I can explain my process a little easier. So I started by mapping out all the veins of the leaf using a firm pressure of my polychromos. I think it was the cadmium yellow lemon, and I used a sharp point and a really firm pressure to do this to indent into the paper, because as you can see what I'm doing right now, I'm going over with a shade of green, just glazing over the top, not worrying about all those individual small shapes. So then I proceeded with all of the green tones. I just laid a layer of green down first and then a slightly darker green for the shadowed areas. And then here I'm just going in with a touch of my Zesty pencil blend on a cotton bud or Q-tip just to blend all of that green into the paper. And because of the firm pressure we applied with the polychromos pencil, that has remained in place. And then I took my time working on all those individual little segments, making sure that all the shadows fell in the right place. So once all the shadows were in place, I then went in with my earth green yellowish, one of my favourite green polychromo pencils, and I just took my time with a nice sharp point to really saturate the greens, to try and fill in all the grooves of the paper and just make those greens nice and smooth and rich as well. And then towards the bottom of the leaf, I'm going back in with a darker green to emphasize those shadows. A little bit more pressure in the shadows that fall just behind each of the veins as well. And that helps to give it a little bit more of a 3D depthy effect. And then even more layering of the darker greens to really emphasize those shadows. I'm also very gently going over some of the veins with this darker pencil as well, because the veins are also in shadow. And then emphasizing the veins in the light with a firmer pressure of the polychromos yellow lemon, which is the colour that I started the veins with. So here I am starting with a base layer of, I think it's the slate grey Caran d'Ache luminance pencil. I'm just blocking in a layer of colour first, going in with a little bit of shadowing of my polychromos pencil before going over with a touch of my odorless mineral spirit just to blend some of that pigment and move some of that pigment into the grooves of the paper. I'm going for a really simple effect here. I don't want this to distract too much from the flowers. And I'm also adding lots of small circles for a slight grainy type of texture here. So I'm applying lots of small circles, some varying pressures as well to emphasize that graininess. And then I'm just applying a little bit more pressure with my black polychromos pencil as well as my luminance Payne's Grey 30%, and then just softening off with my cotton bud. So I've got a grainy but also soft effect going off. So this is the part of the drawing that I was really excited to get started on, those beautiful bluey purple violet toned flowers. So to avoid feeling overwhelmed by all these flowers, there are lots of shapes there and it can look a little bit overwhelming with all the complexities of the varying different shapes and sizes. So I worked in small sections, starting with these two prominent flowers first. And I started with a base layer of my ultramarine violet. This is just a light purple tone, just to set the scene. And then I started to build up some darker purples and some rich blues in there as well. I was following my reference photo fairly closely to build up the general structure of these flowers, but also I wanted to pull away from the actual colours of the reference photo. I really wanted to amplify those blues and purples in my drawing, so I made sure to pull out some bright blues and bright purples for my actual colour palette. So I made sure to incorporate some middle cobalt blue, some violet, which are from the Caran d'Ache Luminance range of pencils, and then also some light ultramarine. This is the Polychromos pencil. But also I was quite conscious about some of those earthy dull tones that lie within the shadows, so I made sure to incorporate some violet brown just to dull down some of the brightness here and there. So as a process for building up these flowers, I'm starting with a base layer of ultramarine violet and then going in with some lighter blues to blend into those colours. And then going for the most prominent colours that I see. So here you can see I'm going in with some deeper purples and some deeper blues as well. And then emphasising those colours as we build up the layers. I'm generally applying quite a lightish to medium pressure with a sharp point so that my pencil gets into the grooves of the paper. But here and there I'm also increasing my pressure, especially in the shadows under each of those individual petals, just to emphasize them a little and make them pop. I'm moving on to a fresh segment here, and this is a clump of flowers which is not quite so prominent and vivid as the 3 flowers that I've drawn so far, but I'm generally starting with the same process, and I'm seeing all of these individual shapes as abstract shapes rather than individual petals. And this area is also much more in shadow than the rest of the flowers, so I'm making sure to incorporate even more deeper purples. I'm building up those purples with a mixture of my violet Caran d'Ache Luminance pencil, but also increasing the intensity of that purple by mixing some deeper blues in there. I found that the Polychromos Helio Blue Reddish is a perfect colour for this area. It just gives the blue a little bit of vibrancy while also dulling it down into the shadows. I'm moving on to a fresh clump of flowers, and I'm finding the process is a little easier by outlining the edges first before I start to build up those colours. For the centre of the flowers, I've used some olive brown 10%, which is a really nice creamy sort of colour, but it's also a little earthy. So I've used that as a base layer, and then with a darker colour, which I think is the olive brown, I applied around the shadows of that lighter centre, just to pull out a few subtle shadows. So as I go through the process of building up these individual petals, I'm being conscious about those really vibrant purple and blue tones, and I really want to emphasize those. So I'm always making sure to go back in with some deeper colors, especially in the shadows. I'm really emphasizing those shadows with some more Helio Blue Reddish, and where I want them to be even darker, I'm just adding a touch of the dark indigo. I'm also making sure that my pencils are sharp throughout this whole process. We've got lots of really sharp edges throughout this drawing, so I wanted to maintain the crispness of those edges. And that is something that I'm always talking about in my membership tutorials, about keeping your pencil sharp for those crisp edges. The crisp, sharp edges really make a difference to realism, so it's something that I'm always talking about. And with that being said, if you would like to follow along to the full real-time tutorial with full narration throughout, I'll literally talk you through every step. You can find that over on my Patreon channel. The link is in the description box. And over there you will get the full line drawing, the materials list, the reference photo, and my full support throughout drawing this beautiful flower. So when it comes to the actual texture of these flowers, I'm building them up lightly with lots of light layers, which I really do find is key for building up smoothness in coloured pencil. And I'm not just shading the pencil to apply my colour, I'm also using the point of the pencil to bring in some of the subtleties and some of the texture of the petals. So this is one of those areas where we can use the bluntness of a pencil rather than a fine tip. If I really want to create soft focus lines, such as the texture of the petals, then the bluntness of the pencil is really going to work in this case. So we don't always need to maintain a sharp point for everything. Sometimes the bluntness of a pencil really works. So moving on to the right hand side of this flower, and this is where the light is hitting, so my blues are going to be a lot more vibrant and a lot richer as well. So you can see here I've shifted my base layer from a light purple to a light blue, and then I'm building my blues up from there, marking out the general shadows and the shapes of those shadows with some purple tones in as well, because we do want a gentle transition from the purple zone into the blue zone. But as you can see, I'm also incorporating a lot more blue this time, so generally quite a lightish pressure, but increasing that pressure in those shadows where I want the blue to be nice and rich. And in order for those lighter petals to stand out as well, we also need to balance that with some really sharp, deep shadows. So I'm making sure to build up those shadows that lie behind the clumps of flowers. So I've got some really deep purples, some dark indigo, and even a touch of black in there. And then for those light centers and for the edges as well, I'm also bringing in a little bit of my electric eraser and then tidying up with my white Museum Aquarelle pencil. And then a good practice whenever I have pulled out some highlights, I always go back in with my darker pencils to not just add depth, but it also helps to push those highlights forward as well. And as I move further to the right, you can see I'm starting to incorporate more of the light cobalt blue, the Caran d'Ache Luminance pencil. And this is helping to not just smooth out all the pigment underneath, fuse those colours together, but it also helps to give a little bit of a lighter blue appearance. I absolutely adore the light cobalt blue. I think it's a beautiful luminance pencil. It's one of those pencils that blends really well with other colours, and I love the smooth velvety texture that it brings to a drawing. So I've almost finished wrapping up this tutorial, so it's just the finishing touches now. Adding the shadow right underneath and then going through the whole polishing and tidying up process, which can be quite time consuming, especially on something with all these shapes. So I'll cast my eye over everything with a sharp point. I'll make sure all my edges are nice and crisp. I'll amplify the colours even further, just going in with a little bit more pressure of those blues and purples, and also pulling out the deep shadows with my black polychromos as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.